Defcon 5 is a first-person action-adventure game. It was released way back in 1995, with the game being added to PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Panasonic 3DO and the MS-DOS, where you play the role of a character as part of a fictional corporation who is tasked with installing automated defense software within a deep space mining installation that sees it very quickly being attacked by an unknown enemy force that will see you face off against many enemy fighters and even other machines and contraptions on the hunt to kill anything that still lives within the base itself. But if we look at the plot of the game, it's very reminiscent of the early System Shock series in terms of its gameplay, where the player must explore the base to find items that they'll need to establish a line of defense and ultimately escape. But this will involve fighting off invading enemies and deploying defense turrets effectively to hinder intruders' advancements. But make no mistake, any poor choices in this game will result in you being destroyed pretty much. It is a very tough and challenging game, but yet a very solid experience. You also do have access to your own weapons that you can use, like from laser guns, so that you can fight and even attack other enemies to give you some chance of survival. All of the enemy types will range in difficulty, some of them requiring a lot more hits than others in order to defeat them. And as you explore, you will end up having to traverse through many different levels, through hangars, tunnels, living quarters, control rooms, administrative sectors, all with the aims of trying to eliminate the threat and escape. But each area will have its own structure in place that you'll have to solve puzzles, and again you'll also have to set up different defense mechanisms in order to give you an advantage against the intruders. But the one thing to get out of the way, even with regards to the tone of the game, because it is very reflective of the early System Shock titles, it's very dark and atmospheric. In many ways you would even class it as somewhat of an early rendition of a first person horror game to a degree. While the gameplay is slow and it's clunky, there's a lot of strategy involved with regards to its challenges, but the atmosphere alone definitely adds a lot more elements to the mix, as you're never fully aware of what's really going on, and with the dimly lit corridors and environments that you often find yourself in, you never really know what's going to appear until nearly you've stumbled across it, which leads for a very suspenseful plot, and for its time was very immersive. So when the game was released, it was met with fairly decent reviews on all of its platforms, as it took a lot of inspiration from games like Doom and System Shock, like I said, but it tried to add its own narrative to it, and it did a good job for what it tried to represent. But for whatever reason, when we look at the history of likes of games around this time, this game very rarely ever gets spoken about. It's usually overlooked for whatever reason. Right, it's not the most stunning visually of the games that are out there on the PlayStation. Like, we have to remember, this was a very early title on the console and even of systems at that time. But it tried to generate an influence by adding in different concepts from games that were similar to it and tried to put its own spin on the proceedings, if you will. And it did a fairly decent job for what it tried to do. Now, it does take quite a while to get into the game, because when you're playing through it, even though the action fairly heats up, you will find yourself spending a lot of time walking through a series of corridors trying to figure out where you need to go before you find anything that you can interact with, or even find any enemies, which can take a while, and in many cases, to some players, you could probably get bored with it very quickly, more to the point. But for those with a bit more patience, will definitely find a fairly decent and solid title here under the surface. It definitely has a unique and original idea to it, and the pacing, while slow, definitely will get under your skin, especially with the atmospheric elements that surround it. It won't be for everybody, but for those that like atmospheric adventure games, this might be worth a try. But I would love to know your thoughts of Defcon 5 for the PlayStation, or what other platform did you play it on back in the day. Is this a game that you enjoyed, or did you even know anything about this game, because very few people ever talk about it. But if you have played it, it will be interesting to hear your stories of this, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other obscure and early games like this that were released on the PlayStation, then leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and you can check out this playlist here on screen to see a lot more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.